Hello and welcome to This Could Be a Good Time. I wanted to do today a two-part series, or two-part video, not series, that unpacks a little bit more about how this statement, "This could be a good time," came to be a statement that resonated with me so deeply in terms of how I experience my own internal reality and how I see what's happening in the external world. Not that that's the only experience that I have of the world or of myself, but that became a strong enough one that it's become this kind of mantra or rallying cry for my work right now. So I'll start with the external journey, what I saw, what I have seen happening in the world and what I see happening in the world now. For most of my adult life, I was guided by two questions that took on different forms at different times, but right now I would state as how does one live a good life? How do human beings live a good life? A life that feels deeply meaningful and fulfilling and gives them access to the full range of human experience, and that feels authentic and that has a kind of a goodness that overflows from it, or some, sort of exponential goodness that comes out of the person simply because they are. That would be the first question, is how do you live a good life? And the second question is, what does a system look like that would facilitate human beings living this kind of life? And because the system that we currently have, it doesn't. It kind of blocks and hinders and facilitates the living of a life that is far more shallow and disconnected and lacking in vitality than what human beings are truly capable of embodying. And related to that, what does a system look like that would facilitate life and flourishing in the natural world? And both of those questions, I think, should really be framed in terms of what does a system look like that regenerates those realities, because the current system has been so destructive both to the natural world and so traumatic for so many human beings that the system that comes next really has to have the tools and the capacity not just to sustain what is, but to really regenerate the natural world and regenerate human capacities for love and connection and joy and meaning. So, yes, those have been the guiding questions, and they've taken me in lots of different wanderings. But for most of my adult life, the answers to them felt hard to find answers in concrete reality. They felt, whatever answers you could find felt really abstract, and it was hard to see anything of them in reality other than maybe fleeting glimpses of a person who had a little bit of that, what it means to live a good life, or some inkling of, oh, this would be a little bit like what a system that facilitated that kind of human existence. A little bit like what it would look like, but it was pretty fleeting. And so for most of my adult life, I've wrestled with, well, how do you respond to that reality? How do you respond to this reality that you're living in this system that is both bad for you, bad for others, and bad for the natural world, right? And sometimes the answer felt like you should move away to a tropical island or something of that sort. Find some way to just extricate yourself from the system and live life on your own terms without those burdens and stumbling blocks. And sometimes the answer felt like just giving up and acquiescing and just being a person like everybody else. And of course, we all have to do that to some extent, right? And I guess the third option that always presented itself was kind of fighting the system in various different ways, or fighting what you saw in yourself that was blocking this ideal that was kind of beckoning you, right? But the fighting, particularly in terms of fighting the world, right? Fighting the system, fighting the man. Anytime, those fights never gave me a deep sense of hope, or a sense that, yes, this is the way that real change is going to happen. They always felt futile. It always felt too small. It always felt just so easily subsumed, regardless of what it was: protests, lawsuits, making individual changes in how you live, how you purchase, and things like that. Yeah, they just felt small in the face of this system. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I started noticing that something was shifting, that there were starting to be way more examples of individuals and groups who were living into these ideals in various different ways, sometimes really dramatic ways and sometimes just really small ways. But that when I took them all together, started to take them all in and reflect upon them, it felt to me as if what we were witnessing was the beginnings of this new system that was evolving just organically from people all over the world, digging more deeply within themselves and being kind of dogged, or finding some inner strength to do something differently. And you can, just a few examples, you can see it in the B Corporation movement, the huge increase in the number of cooperatives that are being formed of all different stripes. There are eco-villages popping up everywhere. Transformational music festivals, other spaces that have that kind of ethos of just celebration and fun, but that is infused with this kind of love that really increases human connection in a way that I think at a deeper level than I had experienced in other kinds of spaces like that. So I started to see this new system taking root in all of these different forms. And I started to see this new system even in small little tweaks, things like the craft beer industry, right? Maybe it doesn't seem like craft beer is going to save the world, but there is a significant shift in the human person and where that business is coming from, when it's coming from a place of really passion and love for making something that is beautiful and tasty and that other people will enjoy, right? It's becomes a kind of offering and a passion. Like, that brings a different energy to the world and produces different results. And I don't think it's an accident. One of my favorite examples from the craft beer industry is there were two brewers who brewed, I think it was a stout, that had the same name. So under the old system, they would have taken each other to court and spent, bukus of money on attorneys to fight this out of who got to have the stout called whatever it was originally called. But instead, they got together and had a beer at a bar and decided to pour their beers together and produce a collaboration, not litigation ale. I might have that name slightly wrong, but the general facts, the general important facts in that story are there. And I don't think it's an accident that you have examples like that arising within an industry where at least a certain percentage of the people there are really being driven by something deeper within themselves, right? And so they're able to get to this place where that is the logical conclusion, not let's fight it out over money and rights to this name. Anyway, so I started to see all of these realities in the world, and it filled me with a great deal of hope, which is not what I felt about the world maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Right before I started noticing this, I was actually in in DC for a summer, and the weather was really erratic, and I was pregnant with my second child, and I was away from my family, and I was working in DC, a place that I used to really love and get energized by, and I couldn't feel anything but just this great hopelessness about this place that seemed now so incapable of rising to the challenge of what needed to be done. And as a mother, feeling such intense grief at the suffering that we were leaving the next generations to endure, the mess that we were leaving them to clean up. So for me, as I began to notice all of these things, it was a really profound shift of focus and energy. And since that time, it's just been this growing, it's not just the number of examples that I could come up with, but also this growing sense that that's really what's going to do it. That's really what's going to change the world. That's really what's going to kind of bring in this new system that will be so much better for human beings, and so much better for the natural world. So, I would leave you with the thought that whatever niche you're in, whatever your passion is, whatever your job is, whatever your hobbies are, look out in the world and you will find people who are doing it in sometimes radically different ways, sometimes just a little tweak, but that a tweak that's really important for just opening up the possibility of deeper life and flourishing for themselves and for everyone who comes into contact with what they're doing. And yeah, find your way to be a part of that. And I'll talk a little, unpack that transition more in later videos. All right, thank you for listening.